Emily sat alone in her family's darkened house, the soft glow of the television the only light in the room. The streets outside were silent, the kind of silence that felt too heavy for a suburban neighborhood. Her parents were out, leaving her alone for the evening, something she had done plenty of times before. Tonight, though, there was an uneasy tension in the air she couldn't quite place. The movie flickered on the screen, a horror film she had seen a dozen times, but each jump scare landed differently in the stillness. She huddled beneath a blanket, listening for sounds beyond the hum of the television. A creak came from the hallway. She stiffened, turning the volume down. Just the house settling, she thought. But the noise came again, this time from outside. Her heart began to race. She pressed mute on the remote and listened, eyes wide and scanning the room. The soft crunch of footsteps echoed from the yard. Slowly, she turned her gaze toward the large living room window. Through the thin curtains, a figure stood just beyond the glass, motionless. Too dark to make out details, it was little more than a silhouette, but its presence was unmistakable. Frozen, Emily waited, hoping the shadow would move away, convinced it was a trick of the light. But it stayed. The figure's head tilted slightly as though watching her, an eerie, deliberate movement that made her pulse thud painfully in her chest. She clenched the blanket tighter, her mind racing. The silence in the house grew oppressive. Without moving from her spot, she reached for her phone, her fingers trembling. Just as she touched the screen, the figure moved, suddenly and swiftly, disappearing from view. Emily's stomach lurched. She scrambled to dial, but the phone slipped from her shaky hands and clattered to the floor. She didn't dare retrieve it. Her eyes flicked to the window again, expecting the figure to reappear. A few minutes passed, minutes that felt like hours, and nothing happened. The tension in her muscles began to release, her body easing from its rigid posture. She forced herself to stand, crossing the room to make sure the doors were locked. As her fingers turned the lock on the front door, a loud thud echoed from the back of the house. She spun around, her breath shallow, eyes darting toward the kitchen. There was no time to think, only to react. She bolted toward the nearest hallway closet and wedged herself inside, pulling the door shut just enough to leave a crack for air. Her ears rang with the deafening sound of her heartbeat as she crouched in the darkness, listening. Another thud, this time closer. Then the unmistakable creak of the back door being pushed open. Footsteps entered the kitchen, slow and deliberate. Each step seemed calculated, as if whoever or whatever had entered the house knew she was there. The footsteps continued, moving through the kitchen and into the living room. The TV light flickered faintly through the small gap in the closet door, casting strange, dancing shadows. Emily's breaths were shallow, trying to quiet the sound of her fear. The footsteps stopped just beyond the closet, mere feet from where she was hiding. A shadow passed across the sliver of light, pausing. She closed her eyes, willing herself not to move. The air felt thick and heavy, each second dragging by. The shadow lingered, the tension unbearable. Then, as if deciding something, it moved away. The footsteps retreated, back toward the kitchen, out of sight. A door creaked open again, the back door, and silence fell over the house. Minutes passed, but Emily couldn't bring herself to move. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, she crawled from the closet. The house was eerily quiet again, but she didn't dare stay another second. Grabbing her phone from the floor, she bolted for the front door, her hands trembling as she fumbled with the lock and burst out into the night. The yard was empty, the street as still and quiet as when the night had begun. Yet as she sprinted down the sidewalk toward the safety of a neighbor's house, she couldn't shake the feeling that something was still watching from the shadows. Thank you for watching this video. If you'd like to see more of our content, please hit the subscribe button.